Hey everyone, welcome to part 41 of my Pokemon game series in Unity. So this is the second video on scene management, and in this video we'll look at how to switch scenes when the player steps on the portal. Alright, so this is a new scene here. Special thanks to all my Patreons for making the series possible. By becoming a Patreon, you can support me in the making of the series and get access to some cool rewards like the complete project files of the series, which also contains some advanced features that are not covered here. So let's start the video. So in the previous video, we created the portal, and right now when the player enters the portal, we are just printing a log. All right. So instead of this, we need to switch the scene when the player enters the portal. So first, let's create a second scene so that we can switch to that. So inside scenes folder, I'll create a new scene called route 1. All right. And I'll rename our current scene to something like hometown. All right. So if we go to the route 1 scene, right now we don't have anything. It's just empty. So here we have to create this scene using tile maps, just like we did for our first scene. So to save time, what I'm going to do is I'll go to hometown and I'll copy all our tile maps. So I'll copy the grid game object and I'll paste it into the route 1 scene. Okay. So in this scene, let me go ahead and remove the houses and long grass and all that we have. You can go ahead and create your second scene properly, but I just need a blank scene for now to make the scene switching work. So I can go to tile palette, select the eraser and erase the houses and grass. So I can erase this one tile at a time, or I can select multiple tiles from here and then select eraser. So now our eraser will be big and we can easily erase this. Okay. So next let me go to the long grass layer and erase that too. And then I'll just go back and select a single tile, select eraser again, and I'll erase two fences over here. Oops, I have to select the solid objects layer, and I'll erase two fences over here so that the player has a way to enter the scene. So what would happen is when the player go through here, this portal, he should come out of here. All right. So now we have the second scene. So let's write the code to switch the scene when the player enters the portal. So inside our portal script, instead of writing this log, I'll create a new function called switch scene, and this function is going to be a coroutine. Okay. So in this function, in order to switch scene, we can use scene manager. All right, to use scene manager, we have to import Unity engine dot scene management. All right, and to switch scene, we can use scene manager dot load scene async. So basically we have load scene and load scene async. So the difference between these is load scene async is like a coroutine. It'll let us wait until the scene is completely loaded. So we want to use load scene async, and to this function we have to pass the index of the scene that we want to load. All right, so what's the index of the scene? So we have these two scenes right here, but in order to switch the scenes, we should first go to the build settings. It's inside file and build settings, and in here we have to add our scenes into the scenes in build list. Okay, so we can simply uh, drag and drop these scenes into this list and it'll appear here. So once you do that, you can see a number over here. So hometown is 0 and root 1 is 1, right? So this is the index of the scene, and this is what we have to pass for switching the scene. So let's go back to our script, and here we can pass the index of the scene. So what I'll do is I'll create a serialized field called scene to load. So this will take the index of the scene that we want to load. All right. So by default, I'll set it to something like -1, just so that we'll get an error if we forget to set this from Unity. So now we can pass this variable to our load scene async function. And since this function is an async function like a coroutine, we can use yield return in order to wait for its completion. All right, so that's all we need. So let's call the switch scene coroutine from here. Okay, so let's go to Unity, and in the portal, I'll set the scene to load to 1 since that's the index of the second scene. And let's try testing this. Okay, so if I step on the portal, the scene switches and we are now in the second scene. So if you pause the game, you can confirm that this is the second scene. But the problem is we don't have the player in the second scene, so we can't move around. So what we should do is things like player, game controller, battle system, and all that shouldn't be destroyed when we switch the scene, right? Right now, when we load the second scene, everything gets destroyed and we don't have anything in the second scene. So we have to make sure that essential objects like player, game controller, and all that will not be destroyed. So to achieve this, what I'll do is I'll create a new game object called essential objects. All right. And I'll reset the position of this game object to 0. So this is very important. This game object is going to hold all our essential game objects. So it's important that the parent game object is placed at 0. Otherwise, it'll get hard to manage the things that are under this game object. Okay, so next we should put all our essential game objects under this game object. Okay, so I'll select the player, the battle system, and event system is part of the canvas, so I'll also select that. And I'll select the game controller and I'll select the canvas. So inside the canvas is where we have our dialog box. So we need to select the canvas also. And I'll drag these into the essential objects. So now all these game objects are a child object of the essential objects game object. Okay. So now what we have to do is we have to make sure that the essential objects doesn't get destroyed when we load a new scene, right? So for that, what I'll do is I'll create a new script. So I'll create it inside a folder called core. I just named it core because this is something that we can reuse in multiple games. It's not just specific to Pokemon games. So here I'll create a new script called essential objects. Okay, and I'll assign it to our game object. So let me open this up. So in here, what we have to do is we have to make sure that the game object that is holding the script doesn't get destroyed when loading a new scene, right? So Unity has a function called don't destroy on load in order to do this. So inside the awake function, I'll call don't destroy on load, and for the game object, I'll pass the game object of this component. Okay. So now whenever we switch scenes, the essential objects should not be destroyed. So let's try this out. Okay, let me switch the scenes. Oops, looks like we have a problem. So let me try to pause the game. So yeah, here you can see don't destroy load is working properly. But the problem is we have two cameras in the scene. So let's go to the root one scene and let's remove the main camera, right? We already have a camera attached to the player. So let's test now. Okay, so this is scene 2. So you can see that scene switching is working and all our essential game objects are transferred to the second scene. So next, when we switch the scene, the player should appear over here, right? Right now, he's just appearing in the same position of the previous scene. We don't want that. Instead, when the player goes through here, he should appear over here. All right. So what we have to do is, after switching the scenes from the portal, we should update the position of the player so that he is placed correctly in the new scene. So how can we get the position at which we should load the player? So for that, what I'll do is, in our portal game object, I'll create a game object called spawn point under the portal. Okay. So let me use a different icon to indicate the spawn point. I'll just use this diamond. So the spawn point will give us the position at which the player should spawn when the player loads to the scene. Okay. So let's say the player is transferred from a portal in another scene to this portal, then the player should spawn over here, right? So what I'll do is I'll select the spawn point and I'll change the y to 1. Actually, I'll change it to -1 so that the spawn point is over here. So next, we need to add a portal in the second scene also. So first, let me just turn this into a prefab. So inside game, I'll create a new folder called scene management. And I'll drag and drop the portal here in order to turn it into a prefab. All right. So now let's go to the second scene and I'll place a portal over here. Okay. Let me just fix its position. All right. So in this case, when the player is transferred to this portal, he should spawn over here, right? So the spawn point should be at the y position of 1 instead of -1. All right, the player should spawn over here. So let's grab a reference to the spawn point from the portal script. So here, I'll create a variable to store the spawn point. Okay, let's assign it from the inspector. So when assigning it, you have to make sure to go inside the prefab and assign it from here. Okay, if you don't do that, the change will only be reflected in this game object, not all the objects of the prefab. All right. So now we have the spawn point at which we should spawn the player. So we can simply update the position of the player to the spawn point, right? But there is a problem. So let me explain. So this portal over here is responsible for switching to scene 2, right? Now, once we load the second scene, that is, once this function is complete, the portal will be destroyed, right? And if the portal is destroyed, this script won't execute any further. So right now what will happen is, after this line, nothing will be executed in the script. So let me try to prove it to you by writing a log. So I'll just write some log here. So this log won't appear in our console since the portal will be destroyed before that. So let's test this. Okay. So if I switch the scene, you can see that the log we wrote doesn't appear over here. So since we have to update the player's position after loading the scene, we need to find some way to fix this. So what we can do is we can use the don't destroy onload function to make sure that the portal won't be destroyed. Okay, so just like for the essential objects, we can use this function to make sure that the portal won't be destroyed when a new scene loads. But after we finish executing all our logic, we need to make sure to destroy it. Okay, so in the end, I'll say destroy game object. So the portal won't be destroyed until we execute all our logic, and after that, we'll destroy it. So now let's test if the log is appearing. Okay, let me switch scene real quick. All right, so now the log is appearing. So next, instead of just writing this log, we should update the position of the player to the spawn point of the destination portal. So first let's find the destination portal. So we can use find objects of type, and the type here is portal. So this function will return all the portals in the current scene. So we just need the first one. So I'll say dot first. So we have to import link in order to use first, and that should return the first portal. But we need to add one more condition here. Even though this will only return the portals in the current scene, remember that the portal through which we switch the scene is not yet destroyed, right? It's not yet destroyed even though the new scene has been loaded. So we just have to add an extra condition over here saying x not equal to this. So this line will return the first portal in the current scene, which is not the portal we used to transfer. All right, so let's store this in a variable called destination portal. I'll just call it des portal for short. And then we can get the spawn point of the des portal to get the position at which we should place the player, right? So first let's create a property to expose the spawn point. All right. And then we can use that to set the position of the player. So first let's cache a reference to the player from this function. Okay, and I'll cache it from here. All right, and now we should be able to say player dot transform dot position and set it to destination portal dot spawn point dot position. All right, so this should work, right? But before we do this, let me explain a problem that we have with our current approach of how we position our characters. So right now, all our characters like player, trainer, and NPC and all needs to be placed at the center of the tile. Actually, it's not at the exact center, it's slightly above the center to give some perspective. So all our characters like trainers and NPCs, if you look at their positions, the X position needs to be zero point 0.5 and the Y position needs to be 0.8 or 0.2 if it's negative in order to place it in the way we want. So the problem here is the designer who's going to build the world of this game will have to manually do this for all the characters, right? And since we created portals right now, they'll have to also do this for spawn points. All right, spawn points should also be placed at the center of the tile to make sure that the player is placed at the center. So the point is, it'll be a pain for the designers to place all the characters and spawn points and all that exactly in this way. So let's try to automate this using code. So what I'll do is in my character script, I'll create a new public function called set position and snap to tile. So this function will take the position which we want to set. All right. So in here, we have to snap this position to the center of the tile. So for that, I'll say position.x equal to mathf.floor of position plus 0.5. Okay, so let me explain what this does. So let's say the position to set was something like 2.3. Okay, but that's not at the center of the tile. We have to snap it to the center. So after passing through mathf.floor, the fraction of this decimal will be removed. So this will become 2. And after that, we'll add a 0.5 and make it 2.5. So now it will be at the center of the tile. Okay, so that's how it works. So let's also do this for the Y. Okay, all right, so for the Y, we don't want it to be at the exact center. Instead, we want it to be placed slightly above to give some perspective. So here you can see the Y is at 0.8. So in our player controller, we have an offset here, which we can reuse. So what I'll do is I'll move this to the character script. So I'll make this a property instead. Okay. And I'll set its value to 0.3. So here we can say 0.5 plus offset Y. So now from the player controller, we can remove this and use the property that we created here. So here I'll say character dot offset Y. All right, so let's go back to the character script, and in the awake function, when the character is initialized, let's also call this function in order to snap it to the center of the tile. So for the position, I'll just pass the current position. So basically what this will do is this will snap the current position of the character to the center of the tile. And by the way, we forgot to set the updated position back to transform.position. So let's set it. So now let's go to Unity and test this. So let me set the position of the player to some random position, and I'll also do that for the trainer. So now they are not at the center of the tile or anything, but when we start the game, they should automatically snap to the center of the nearest tile. So let's test this. Okay, so if we pause the game, you can see that both the player and the trainer has been snapped to the center correctly. All right, so we can also test if the perspective and things are working properly. So yeah, this is how we want it. So now let's go back to setting the position of the player after scene switching. So in our portal script, after switching scenes, instead of setting the position directly, we can call the new function that we created in character. So we don't have access to the character. So in player controller, let's create a property to expose it. And now we can access player.character and call set position and snap to tile function. Okay, so for the position, I'll pass destination portal dot spawn point dot position. So now the player's position will be set to the spawn point of the destination portal, and we don't have to worry about placing the spawn point at the center of the tile or anything. This function will automatically do it for us. So let's test this. Okay, so if I go through this portal, I'll be placed on the spawn point of the destination portal. So that's working correctly. So now we are switching the scenes correctly, but there are a lot more issues that we need to fix and improvements we need to make. So for example, if I go back to the starting scene, oops, I'm not going to the starting scene, I'm just loading the same scene again. So let's go to route 1, and for this portal, the scene to load should be 0, since that's the index of the hometown. So let's try that. I just wanted to show you a bug that we have right now. So if I switch scenes and then come back to the first scene, then you can see that the player is placed at its initial starting position. So if we try going up, you'll see this weird bug where there are two players in the scene. So in the next video, we will fix issues like these and do a lot more improvements to scene switching. So I'll stop the video here. If you think this videos are helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel. That'll really help me out. And you can also support the series by becoming a Patreon. So I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.